Hey there, neighbors and naysayers. May 19th, 2024. I didn't really have a minute, but I took it to come up here and take a look at the bale grazing. So I guess I had no intention of taking a video, but what I wanted to look at was I came up to see what the growth was looking like in the bale scars. This field has not been grazed since the calves left it. But what was shocking and striking was this isn't too bad, and it gets better as we go. Right over there's some posts sticking up. So the water trough was right in there, and the cross fence came. I can see a post that's still left right about 50 feet in front of me, and the growth here is really good, and then it just gets shorter as we go toward where they last grazed, which is kind of interesting because you would think they would overgraze this whole thing the same amount, being that they were up here into the start of the growing season, but that's not what actually happens. It's overgrazed, yes, but as we get down here, this would be the second to last set of bales, and it did get seeded. You can see a bunch of red clover coming in it, a bunch of white clover, plantain, turnips, all that coming in it. But then look at how thin it gets as we get down to, that was this also second to last bale scar there. And then where the bale rings are, I did not move the bale rings from the last time they had a bale in them. I also did not seed around them, and you can really tell the difference. There's some red clover coming in, red or white, I guess it's baby, so I don't really know at this point. But this field has been frost seeded a million times, so we had latent seed in the ground. But what else is coming up is weed. We'd be better off to go ahead and seed that than we would to leave it be what it is. But I guess bigger story is, yes, it's overgrazed, but it's just the last 2 weeks of that growing season. That's when the grass is really starting to grow, and that's when it really got hurt. Everything else, they didn't really go back and graze it once I gave them a new slice with bales, so they never went back and really hurt it, and it went ahead and come when it was time to grow. It had a good recovery. I guess we could make an argument here is that it had a chance to recover before the growing season started. It wasn't just hit right hard as the growing season started, or what was it? But this had already just started waking up for the spring and got grazed, and that's when it really hurt it. The earlier stuff that got overgrazed and didn't really get hit hard starting for the spring looks pretty good. Now, to add to that this quandary here of what we're looking at, this is thin and it's short, but by God, there's a bunch of clover coming in it. Again, this has been frost seeded. Probably, I've owned this 13, 14 years now. It's probably been frost seeded 7 or 8 times and never really responded to any of them. You know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, I finally got the different result I was looking for. We finally got some clover, and that's because we beat the tar out of it this winter. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. It'll give it a chance to go ahead and grow up here, and we'll have a clover patch up here, which is awesome. Take advantage of that free nitrogen wherever we can. For those of you that are saying bloat, I don't worry about bloat. If it kills a cow that had bloat, I don't want her around anyway. I'm not going to bother with her. My cows also never move when they're hungry. They also typically move at night when it's not going to be wet anyway. So I don't know that I've ever had trouble with bloat. The only trouble I've ever had has been in the wintertime, not in the summertime. I did have a ewe bloat the other day, and that's just because she got cast and was laying downhill. So those things happen. She has now lambed. I can't even tell the difference between her and all the other sheep. So I guess moral to the story here is it's the last 2 weeks that really have an effect on things, and that's a good and bad thing. I have been really concerned about the fescue. We've been thinking here lately on finishing steers and how fast we're getting them finished and when, because processing dates are coming up, and my processing dates are scattered all over the summer because that's what I could get. And the fescue really hurts us when it comes to gain. It's great for winter stockpile, but it's terrible for gain, especially this time of year. They won't touch it this time of year. And they don't like it typically most of the year until we get a frost. So we're trying to dilute the fescue as much as we possibly can. And in doing so, it looks like the last 2 weeks of grazing is when we really have, last 2 weeks of bale grazing is when we really have an effect on the fescue, when we really can stun it good enough to get other things to grow up. As I've been driving around today, I've drove through a bunch of patches that we've winter fed on. One, Ethan and I figured we probably fed on it the winter of 2020. And it's still got a pretty good patch of Italian ryegrass growing in it. Italian ryegrass is a biennial. It's not supposed to last more than 2 years, but because we let it go to seed every year, we're getting and keeping Italian ryegrass in those fields. And that's what we kind of have to look at doing here going forward, especially that last 2 weeks of bale grazing. We need to be in here and overseeding it. And I think I would rather overseed it prior to letting them eat the bales, especially the last 2 weeks, than former. And I think, or than after, I guess. And I think I just went around and I spread seed on all the bale scars, and that's just because it was plantain and I was short on plantain and short on turnip and short on chicory, so I only just spread the bale scar. I didn't think there was enough opening in what was bale grazed, but I really think if we haven't frost seeded the field lately, it needs frost seeded at frost seeding time. I don't even know that I wouldn't be thinking hard about spreading seed on these before we set the bales and let the cows stomp it in. It ain't going anywhere. I mean, and I guess the caveat there is we set the bales in November, where it's really not going to grow at that point. If you're setting the bales earlier in the season, you wouldn't want to do that. But I think we could really do some things with seed. If you can't tell, this gets me excited. I don't show it much, but like, how to beat the fescue is the problem. And don't take this as I'm a fescue hater. I'm not. I love fescue for winter. I love fescue for stockpile grass. I love fescue for cow feed. I don't like it for growing steer feed. I don't like it for lamb feed. It's just, we need to mix it. And you know, the solution to pollution is dilution. We want a diversified mix as far as clovers and everything else goes, and we just need to make sure that we're shooting for 30% of our legume being red clover, white clover, alfalfa. I would love to have 5 to 10% in a non-bloating legume like bird's foot trefoil. I don't know that I'll ever get it, but I'd love to. Lespedeza, sweet clover, I think. I'm not sure. I've never tried Sanfroin. It's one of those non-bloating. I'd love to have 5 to 10% of that. And then that leaves 50%. I'd love to have the other 50% in grass. Maybe 25% of that being in fescue, 25% being in orchard grass, bluegrass, Italian ryegrass. I mean, in a perfect world, the whole farm would be 50% Italian ryegrass and 50% red clover, white clover, alfalfa, bird's foot trefoil. This is not a perfect world, and I'll never get there. A man can dream, but I'll never get there. So I guess I just wanted to take a look at what this looks like today and what it continues to look like through the summer. We've got a lot of these places to go back to, but just for some reason today, I said, I really want to go up there and look at what those bale scars look like. I guess it's because I'm building fence on what we bale unrolled. I had to fence out the area that we really unrolled a bunch of bales on today, because it's just not growing yet. It's not up. It's up about 3, 4, 5 inches, and I don't want the sheep to kill it just yet because there's a ton of Italian ryegrass in that. So interesting times. The only problem I see on my horizon is we're getting to a point where if we ever get the rented farm fenced, it's just a daunting process with my life and the boys, and having them half the time and not having them half the time. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have them, and I'd have them all the time if I could, but I struggle to get over there and get anything done. If we ever do that, though, and we can stockpile enough grass, that will greatly improve our gains on our calves through the winter, and we'll finish steers faster. But at that point too, though, we won't have this bale grazing opportunity that we have now. Not as much, it's not as big as we do now. We still will have that last month, 60 days to a month before green grass that we'll have to feed some hay. I'd say 60 days. So we'll still get that last 2 weeks that we can reseed some fields, and I'll have to do the math on what our whole herd would cover in the last 2 weeks. I think it's somewhere around 6 to 10 acres. So every 10 years we'd get over the whole farm and bale graze the last 2 weeks on parts of it. That could really make a difference. It doesn't sound like much, but if you got over 10% of the farm in the last 2 weeks and got a chance to interseed some new stuff, that would be huge. I think this grass-fed beef thing is huge as far as our bottom line and what we do, and we just need to find a way to make sure that they gain better and continue to gain better. And the one way we need to do that is to dilute the fescue as much as possible. And this is probably the best way I've found, short of Roundup. And I'm not going to round up one of these fields and plant a whole new seeding. That's just not me, and I don't want to, and my customers don't want me to either. I don't have any Roundup on the farm, so I don't want to start now. The only thing I've ever used Roundup for in the last 10 years was to plant the warm season grass seeding, and that's just because that was the only way to get it established. And I planted that right back down in something else, oats. That particular field I planted oats, radishes, crimson clover, and something else, just to get something green growing on it right away. That was the only way to establish warm season grass, and so that's what we had to do. So this is probably by far the best way I've found to get some new dilution in here, to lower our fescue count. We're never going to get rid of it. It's always going to be here, but if we can dilute it some, we're doing a good thing for the whole operation. So with that, I'll say, we'll see you next time.